Hi there. This is part of a series of videos I'm making reacting to the big cover story that House of the Dragon had in The Hollywood Reporter last week. I would have gotten to it sooner, but then it was Comic-Con, so I had to cover all the Comic-Con news. I'm going to break this up into more than one video by topic. This one is on, there were specific subsections with their own headers, on what they said about diversity, both with women and with race. Because there was an actual subsection titled The New Battlefield, Diversity. I want to go over this, and I saw some other major channels from YouTube reacting to it over Twitter, some criticizing, some defending, and it was a short enough comment that they made that, well, I'm sorry if you're looking for an hour-long rant, but my conclusion I'll give you up front is I can't tell from these brief, vague comments and sometimes just platitudes what the actual show is going to be like with these issues. We're going to have to watch it in order to judge it, unfortunately. I can't tell from all these talking points if you're reading into it. What I can say is that generally I thought the showrunners were trying to be non-committal. They were trying to say something positive without... I recognize they can't lay all this blame on the old showrunners because that would look bad. But they were trying to say generic things if we're going to handle that better. And they weren't in charge. Like, Ryan Condal was not a part of this during the run of Game of Thrones. I don't expect him to talk about that. But, like, the HBO executive and the article author, the Hollywood Reporter's journalist writing this, felt kind of tone deaf. So they actually say different things throughout the article, and I was worried if some people were, like, saying... pointing to this line is, oh, the showrunners are really... Well, the showrunner didn't say that, the article author did, and it was a gaffe, but that's on them. And there's two halves of this I'm going to cover differently, because the women's stuff, they admittedly weren't on the controversies of the past. I don't expect Ryan Condal to answer questions about the Sansa rape, but they've made some, race changes with the Velaryons and stuff for House of the Dragon. I expect them to give a better answer about their own decisions. It's fair of, okay, that was your decision, can you talk about that more? Well, with the women's stuff, that was actually changed over the years. It started with, wow, there's a really bad nudity imbalance on this. There's so much female nudity, no male nudity. It's like some 13-year-old's porn fantasy. SNL mocked it as it's a 13-year-old boy making up extra brothel scenes that just linger on with male gaze. And this, and like other HBO shows have sex and nudity in them, this felt juvenile, was the real thing. That it felt like a 13-year-old wrote it. And I remember, like, College Humor making fun of the nudity imbalance, and they'd ask the cast members at, like, the season 3 Comic-Con, they go, ha, yeah, I guess we should have a better nudity imbalance, and then they never address it. It was always an open problem. That this is starting to be, like, it's puerile. But then by the middle of the show, when they switched to having rape controversies, I remember them actually saying, isn't it great we don't have so much nudity anymore? Like the writers patting themselves on the back for not having as many brothel scenes, and you have a whole other set of problems now. With the Sansa rape stuff, it wasn't just the Sansa one, but that was the huge one. And then by the final seasons, it was, writing the female characters so badly or killing them off was also insulting. So just the whole criticism if you don't write women well, and even at the time, it was unusual for an Emmy-level show to go 5 years without a female writer. It would have been unusual for them to go, I looked it up, like on a scale of 30 years, this was the first time in 30 years an Emmy-level show went 2 seasons without a female writer, much less 5. And why were people going into season 8 hyped that this was the best show ever when they had all these behind-the-scenes issues? And let me be clear, it's not just that they did this, what gets to me is the hypocrisy of the news media, that the same reporters, I'm not going to name names, but people who were complaining about the gender imbalance behind the camera on other shows, which weren't as bad as this, that this has been 4 years since we had a female writer, just stopped criticizing it. And that bizarre contrast of they'd be criticizing other shows that were not as bad as this in terms of number of women behind the camera, and it was really the hypocrisy of their own values on that. But the way the article addresses it, there's actually two halves, like I said. There's the way the article author and the HBO exec handle it is just putting their foot in their mouth, because they contradict each other. And then what the showrunners actually said, which is, okay, that's kind of generic, but we'll see what happens. That the article, this is Hollywood Reporter's guy, said the show Game of Thrones was criticized for its handling of the sexual violence inherent in Martin's world, which is directly inspired by medieval Europe. Wow, okay, that's just cowardice. And this has made me angry. It's hilarious that this isn't the first time they've done this. You're trying to deflect from, why did you change the Sansa story to marginalize her, or you invented this other thing, by going, well, that's what things were like back then in the books, or well, the books are like that, or the Middle Ages are like that. And this would be different if it's like, to represent the war gutting Westeros, you had Lannister soldiers raping villagers. That happens. You could say that's what war is like. We are criticizing that you are marginalizing the female characters, that Sansa is not a player anymore, that you reduced her to that. And how many of you have seen the people going, oh, well, why are you complaining about the Sansa rape? It happened in the books, just to a different character. And the whole point is you ruined this character's arc. And then we get tired of it and stop saying it. I would like an hour-long panel or something going, what was Sansa's TV arc? That she didn't defeat Ramsay, that Littlefinger did, that she didn't defeat Littlefinger. That it's the same thing of just have her give power shots of her on the camera and play swelling music and act like she did something. Or, well, she's been really marginalized also by Season 8. Dress her up in a queen outfit and play swelling music of her sitting on a throne. That makes her powerful. That is not narrative agency or political agency. That we're talking about, you wrote these characters very badly, or even complaints like you marginalized Catelyn Stark as a political player. I didn't forget that, even though that happened back in the early seasons. But that this article, it's you. If you're lying, you're admitting you're afraid. The cowardice of that, of if Benioff outright said, I wanted to show rape and I felt the best way to do it was to have it happen to a major character, that would be one thing. But the way they said it was, we wanted to win Emmy Awards. But the way the article author is saying this, that criticized for how it handled what was inherently in the book and the Middle Ages. Look, we're criticizing the handling part, not that, oh, well, it was in there. But you could almost see the article presenting that. Next thing, right below that, the HBO executive actually starts trying to shift the blame by going, we're a lot more aware of it now. That he's saying, oh, we wouldn't do that today. You see how it's contradicting what the reporter said, that he's now admitting it was bad to do that, but saying, societal attitudes are different now. We wouldn't have done that if the Sansa rape, it was in the distant past. It was only 7 years ago. That it would be amazing if this happened, like on video as a live panel, have someone trying to deflect, that's what the Middle Ages were like, and the next person go, yeah, and I mean, we did things 7 years ago we wouldn't do today because we're a lot more aware of the controversy now. They cancel each other out. And on top of that, the absurdity of, even if it wasn't contradicting the first thing, saying, well, it was the mistakes of the past, we're more aware of it now. It was a mere 7 years ago, or the Sansa rape, or even the nudity stuff in Season 1. These things were controversial when they happened, and you were trying to diminish and trivialize all of these criticisms, that you weren't portraying women well since day one, and it got worse over time. But there was a story in the New York Times reporting on the Sansa rape controversy. It was a giant controversy on all these other parts of it that followed them everywhere. And now they're acting like it wasn't a controversy. Well, we're more aware of it. You weren't aware of the Sansa rape being a problem. And admittedly, this guy is the new guy. He wasn't in charge when that happened, and I feel bad that, Casey Bloys is left holding the bag, because even I admit he was not in charge when this happened. He came in as a replacement right at the end when the show was pretty much already finished. He had no control over that, and I admit that. But did someone copy edit this article? Because it's so tone deaf, even what they're saying in isolation of each other, that we're more aware of that now. Or, oh, it was criticized for handling things inherent to the books, when no, we're criticizing book changes. And then to put them next to each other so they look like they're backpedaling and contradicting each other, this is tone deaf. But what did they actually say? Well, Sapochnik said, and I don't have a problem with the way he said this, that I can understand people who read into this. I'm not trying to invalidate that. He said, this is part of the book lore, that the Targaryens are very nonchalant about sex. The Valyrians thought they were above any gods, right? So they would engage in incest. They were very openly sexual. Like, we've seen that in the promo stuff. There's like erotic tapestries in the Red Keep. I thought it was a good idea to show that, well, their culture is very different from the country they conquered. They're very open about that. And you can tell a not gratuitous. We've seen sci-fi that covers sex-positive aliens, groups, and cultures without being gratuitous porn a 13-year-old boy came up with. Like, there is a lot of nudity in Westworld, but it's generally handled maturely. It's about dehumanizing the robots. You have seen other things that have a lot of nudity in them, and that's not what we're talking about. But what Sapochnik said, and people were picking apart, and I'm saying I can't make a lot of this one way or the other, but he generally was trying to give a respectful answer that the Targaryens are very liberal about sex, but we're trying to film it in a way that isn't gratuitous. And like the whole porn thing, you have to see it to know if it's gratuitous or not, and I can't give an answer for that right now. We will have to judge when we see it. What helps is we just got advanced reviews. I guess it's good that this got delayed, my report on this, because we got reports from people who went to the advanced screening of the first episode about that, and they talked about the sex and nudity in episode 1. That Daemon Targaryen goes to a brothel. That he does that in the books, that Mysaria is in a brothel. He goes there, there's people having sex there, and okay, there's a brothel scene. People in the books go to brothels. But I'm sorry I'm in the middle of the spectrum here on this, but we're not arguing against having brothel scenes. We're arguing against that you just invent random prostitutes, and not to knock that there's prostitutes in it. It shows the realism, but it came to the point it was taking time away from other scenes. When they said we didn't have enough time to set up that Loras is mourning Renly, yet you had time for yet another sex position scene that was repetitive. So I don't know, but I see what he's saying here, that we want to present sex and nudity maturely, but that's two separate things. The rape stuff and then just the gratuitous nudity, those are separate things. And I tell you right now, in the story of Fire and Blood that this is based on, there are no rape scenes as such, though if with named characters, but it's an outline. They mention that there's war rape going on in the Riverlands. So if they were to show that, we would have to judge it. Well, it's a commentary on that war is not glorious. This is a war crime. And I wouldn't oppose that, but it's gratuitous as you know it when you see it. And it wouldn't be ruining like a character arc by, yeah, let's have that character, I'm not going to name names, raped while we're at it. No, that's what you did with Game of Thrones wasn't just showing the horrors of war. You were going for cheap drama because you chose to abandon the books. But what we heard was Matt Smith's Daemon goes to a brothel, but it's, there's other HBO shows with brothel scenes. There's Westworld stuff. And in terms of nudity imbalance, we heard there is a Matt Smith nude scene that you will see fully nude from behind, Matt Smith behindle nudity as Daemon in the first episode. Because, what does he have to be ashamed about? He's Daemon. So, and he's Matt Smith. Everyone likes him. So, point is, everyone who saw it said, well, there's a brothel scene, but it isn't gratuitous or anything. It's what you'd expect. It felt like what the book did. So I think that's what Sapochnik was talking about, that we're not going to take that out and war crimes will happen, but we're not doing it for shock value. But the problem is they repeated the same talking points to us This reporter, these are the talking points we heard before, that there is a legitimate argument about, if you're making a war movie, do you put in rape scenes to reflect that war is like that? They took advantage of it's upsetting how much they took advantage of that we are talking about, you are throwing out Sansa's storyline, and you're hiding behind the shield of, how dare you say it's wrong to represent that war rape happens. That is obscene to me, that you would hide behind, and it's their desperation more than anything, of, you have no sense of shame, that you would hide behind that when we're obvious. I wish a reporter would chat. I'm talking about Sansa. This doesn't happen in the books. It has nothing to do with reflecting the world that it's from. So the rape stuff, I have no reason. I haven't heard any rumors of them inventing things. But specifically with regard to the nudity balance, everyone who saw the premiere said it was about what you'd expect from a straight-up adaptation of the book, that there are characters that go to brothels. And we'll know it when we see it, if there's needlessly long, wandering, lingering shots on just a bunch of women naked in a brothel, that this is the 13-year-old boy again. So I've talked about this. I don't think Sapochnik said that wrong, the way he said it in the thing, that he can't yell about Benioff and Weiss, but he said, we're trying to handle it well, while also showing that they are nonchalant about sex. So that means you show them having sex without zooming in on body parts, So I don't have a firm opinion on this. I would have to see the show in order to judge it. I don't think the showrunners themselves gave a bad quote. I think the executives and the article itself, those excuses they made were ridiculous and contradicting themselves. That's not on the showrunners, so I don't blame them for that. I'll have to see what they did. The other half of this, though, is the race stuff, which is different because, they race swapped the Velaryons, and that was a whole thing. That was a bit more of an ongoing background problem, like not having black characters very prominently when they weren't as prominent in the books is not the same attention-grabbing controversy as, dear God, there was an invented Sansa rape this episode. But it's an ongoing, passive, ongoing background problem. And while there aren't that many black characters in the books, they cut out quite a few. That it isn't unusual to see black people in King's Landing because there's Summer Islander merchants there all the time. And the TV audience thinks it's unusual to see black people in King's Landing. Like, Chataya is a Summer Islander who owns the brothel that's Littlefinger's in the show. Why did you cut her? That was a character you could have put in. Or Strong Belwes, a lot of the Slavers Bay storyline. And I hate when they go, well, we don't want black people who are just pirates and mercenaries. Well, in this world, being a mercenary captain is like, being a general. I think that's an honorable profession, being a sellsword army captain in, like, the Golden Company. But not, but those are professional soldiers, not, the hired goons that are just the low-level mercenaries. But Bravos, for example, Bravos, they say, is racially diverse. They could have very easily made bankers from the Iron Bank could have worked black ones in it, because they say Bravos is a mix of all different races. They could have done more, and that's not even touching how Dorne was an embarrassment what they did in the TV show. And that overlaps with how they present women. And then, killing off Missandei, you just killed off 100% of the black female characters because you had only one. But that was more of a background issue. And I wish they'd done more with it. And the problem with House of the Dragon is it doesn't have the Daenerys storyline. It doesn't even have a storyline in the Eastern Continent where you can work that in. Or if they ever did Targaryen Conquest, Dorne is in it enough that you could work in non-white characters as part of the Dorne subplot. That's really, Dorne isn't a thing in this. So how do you work that in? Generally, I don't have a problem with what they did, because there's different fan explanations we've already come up with of, well, I guess this is how you could explain how, well, the Velaryons are lower-ranking Valyrians out in the provinces, and this is like their Caribbean. Like the islands of the Narrow Sea, they were like the Barbados to Valyria's London, that. And the books do mention that a bit of like, the Pentoshi were low-ranking Valyrians who intermingled with local peoples, and they don't even look Valyrian anymore. Like, there's bits of that you could play with. David Lightbringer's channel has talked about this a lot. He talked about it again in his recent. He went to the screening of the first episode, and he talked about that. But he repeated what he said in an earlier video, which is, you could say they recently married a Summer Islander, or you could say maybe the Velaryons were always like that even back in Valyria, because if you think about it, if each family is practicing incest and inbreeding so much, the 40 Dragonlord families, they're kind of like separate tribes. So the founder effect, if one intermarried with a Summer Islander 1,000 years ago, they'd still look black because they just, practice incest. I don't think that one's true. I suspect it's more just, hey, we're in the narrow sea. There's a lot of Summer Islander trailers. We intermarried with some over time just to get a better trade deal, married some merchants, wealthy merchant's daughter or something. There's a couple of fanon explanations we could come up with, but this is what you call honeypotting from the old fandom, that we come up with explanations like Talissa's a honeypot spy that were better than what they were actually presenting us with. I don't want a fanon explanation to be taken seriously. If you make a change, okay, tell me how this works. And generally, well, I was upset with what the article said, but they implied they did have an answer. That when people were pointing to this as, oh, they gave an answer finally about why they made the Velaryons black in the Hollywood Reporter thing, they just said we made them black because we wanted more diversity. Well, obviously, I mean, that is not a good answer, and I must criticize that. Maybe he said more in the article, cut it out, because this isn't a video. Maybe they edited it poorly. I don't know. But just saying, Benioff did stuff like that on the old show where we'd ask, why did you cut the Tysha reveal from Tyrion? And his actual answer would be in an interview, well, we made the decision to change it. That went to print. But you're talking about, and I don't want to dwell on that too much, but the whole point of the thing was people complaining about the old showrunners. I don't want to yell about that too much, just to say I don't really know what's happening. And I'm not upset by this article, by the showrunners. I think the article is, did they edit this? Because this isn't giving, they could have done a better job with this. That, well, we put them in because we want more diversity. Okay, that's the out-of-universe reason. Do you have an in-universe reason? They sort of imply that they do, like right at the end, where he says, quote, well, we were thinking about it and asking, how are we going to put it in a way that, quote, fits organically? That Ryan Condal himself, he's put himself on the spot now. He said, I feel the way we put them in fits organically. I wish you had said what that organically fitting way was up front in this interview. And we probably accept it. But can you explain? And also, Steve Dessaint, the actor, later on, again, these are clips of maybe what might have been a 20-minute conversation. Maybe it's taken out of context. He said, if you think about it, there are black people in the lands beyond Westeros. Martin's world is actually very diverse. Maybe we should show that. So I think they're leaning towards, they're on the shipping lanes, and one of them intermarried with a Summer Islander at some point, because the Summer Islanders are in the narrow sea all the time. It's a major shipping thing. I think that's what they're doing. And their comments kind of line up with that, but only in general terms of, okay, Mr. Condal, you've said it, you've found a way to make it fit organically. Please tell us. And what I'm really upset about is some people going, and I don't want to invalidate this, oh, you're gatekeeping for saying that it needs to make sense. Well, other people were arguing that it doesn't make sense. And then me and David Lightbringer on his channel did the same thing I did. Well, here's ways you could make it fit the storyverse. And not like going through gymnastics, mental gymnastics. It's just maybe the low-ranking families in the overseas provinces weren't as strict about inbreeding. Blood purity. And again, the comparison of the Caribbean colonies compared to Europe. Maybe they were like, there's real-life examples of empires like that. Or like the fringes of the Roman Empire. That, on the fringe border provinces, people are less strict about that kind of thing. There's ways you can make it fit. Because they go, oh, but the Dragon Lords are obsessed with incest. The Velaryons aren't Dragon Lords. They're the low-ranking merchant families out in the provinces. So you could do that to show that there's social stratification within their empire. It's just, it is not helping that if they have an answer, they should have told us. That if you have well, this is how it's going to fit organically, I don't see how they benefit from waiting until it actually airs to tell us that. That either pick one and stick with it. So I'm trying not to be gatekeeping, but it's not me gatekeeping. Ryan Condal himself in this said, I found a way to do it that fits organically. And we would like to hear what that is. I'll probably agree with him. I'm open to this. If you just unless it's something really odd that is contradictory, I would point that out. But something like, oh yeah, we're merchants, so we intermarried with a Summer Islander at one point from another merchant organization or whatever from their merchant fleets. I'm fine with that. So, how is House of the Dragon doing with diversity in terms of how it's handling women, nudity, and violence, and how it's handling race? Jury's still out for me. That I cannot tell. And I do not like how vague this article was, and I don't even think it's the fault of the showrunners. It's just, I felt like they must have said more that got cut from this or something. So I'm not giving them a free pass, nor am I willing to jump on them for this, like Sapochnik saying, well, we want to show that the Valyrians are very sex positive and have liberal sex attitudes, and they're not ashamed of it, but it won't be gratuitous. We kind of have to see that to judge it. So I'm sorry this isn't a giant rant. It's mostly audio. I don't know what to make of this, and I wish the article was more detailed. And for the women's stuff, I recognize they can't talk about the rape controversy. Maybe in general terms of talking, if you ever get a chance to, I don't know, do Q&A lines with anyone out there, ask about the nudity balance is usually a question they should talk about. But we've heard there's a Matt Smith nude scene in a brothel at some point in episode 1. I wonder if that's going to... Because they did it on Game of Thrones. They had all the men shaving with their shirts off, and that was just cynical. Even they said, oh, it was cynical pandering. We hated doing it, and we never wanted to have another male shirtless scene again because we were forced to do that once. So I'm worried even then, is this just pandering in the first episode, or do you intend to keep doing that? And then there's the problem of that women need to objectify gay men, as you've seen. Are we going to have a really objectifying Laenor Joffrey Lonmouth sex scene, or will it be handled maturely? Or it could be a very hot and heavy sex scene, which is nonetheless handled emotionally and maturely. By the way, have you all seen that new trailer for the new Interview with the Vampire AMC adaptation, starring Jacob Anderson, the Grey Worm actor? And he's got like a shirtless sex scene in it with Lestat and stuff. Well, that's kind of what the story is. So, I don't know. What does gratuitous mean? I don't know. And that's another thing. They race swapped the character in that. Well, New Orleans in the 1800s was this creolized, racially diverse society. I don't think it's out of place for Interview with the Vampire. But I'm going all over the place here. The thing is just, if you were expecting an angry rant, I don't know what to make of it. The showrunners themselves didn't say anything stupid. I do wish they had said something more specific about the race thing. Maybe it got cut from the interview. But the actual interview, the person writing it and the HBO executive, that point where they're going, that's what the book was like. Our whole complaint is the book wasn't like that. And then for him to go, well, we're more aware of that now. Okay, you could even pull the Casey Bloys that you were legitimately, he was not in charge when that happened. He was in the comedy division when that happened. I don't blame him for that. But within two things going, that's what it was like in the source material and in real life. And we're more aware of how offensive it was now. You just admitted it was offensive. And that more aware of it, it was a giant controversy, man. So that's an open-ended question of, are they ever going to get up to a point where they're actually talking about what happened on Game of Thrones with women, which was, as opposed to the race stuff, which was more of a persistent background problem, this was a major problem. All the active, big controversies with women. And I don't know, because I'm seeing a lot of news sites that are hesitant to even report on House of the Dragon as a new show, to do articles on this is who Rhaenyra is and this is who Daemon are. I've seen some reviewers that are really tearing into the trailer, and I realize how much of a bubble we've been in. That, we're the hardcore, YouTube analysis community. General audiences have given up on this as a franchise, and really, I saw the Angry Joe review. They were very, very acidic about all this. I don't know if we're ever going to be able to talk about that for on a scale of years. Like Millie Alcock in the red carpet thing, Millie Alcock young Rhaenyra was asked about that, and she actually gave a decent answer, but she was hesitant about, well, we're a lot better about that now because there are more women behind the camera. So, like, when I was doing scenes, like, we know her romance scenes in episodes 4 and 5, there is a female director behind the camera for that, and there's women writers. But I don't expect the cast to yell about the old showrunners. I mean, that's unfair to them. Don't ask them. I really don't think they should have put her on the spot like that on the red carpet, but it came up. That clip's floating around of how that happened. As for the race stuff, I don't want people to yell at the Corliss actor. He said people have been yelling at me a lot. I don't know, but just if you claimed in a news article, we found a way for the Valyrians to be black or mixed race because they have the Valyrian hair, in a way that fits organically with the storyverse. Okay, you made that claim, now please tell me what the in-universe reason is. I'll probably end up agreeing with you, because there's more than one way to do that. David Lightbringer has given more succinct videos about how that could work. There's more than one way to do it. It's just, don't say, the reason is we wanted more diversity. We assume that. I want to know, well, how did you work that out? And it's weirder not, in my view, weirder not to say that, because, again, David Lightbringer also said this, if you don't think of a plausible reason for it, it's tokenism. And then it doesn't fit the storyverse. And some people are upset. I know the hardcore book purists, I consider myself a book purist, but the really hardcore ones are upset that Syrio Forel wasn't bald like he was in the books. And I respect that you're angry about that, but Martin himself said he didn't care that he was bald. So the cosmetic, if you're going to change it, you have to work it out. As long as you can find a way for it to fit within the storyverse, that this is a character who could have been black. Generally, people from the Eastern continent's a lot more racially diverse. I don't have a problem with that. If you're going to make a change, please be honest with us, because when you're acting evasive and deflecting and like you're hiding something, that means you're not proud of what you did. So I don't know what to make of this interview, one way or the other, how it reflects the final version, and we will have to watch it to judge how well is it handling women, how well is it handling race, both in terms of presenting non-white people respectfully while at the same time not feeling forced and contrived, like it's tokenism. A separate issue I'll bring up right at the end is like other people have pointed out, Mysaria being this dragon lady, brothel worker who's scheming, that is a trope of the Asian woman who's the scheming madam is a thing. And you got the people who said they saw the first one, said you got a sense she's more than that, and she does turn into this spy master role, but there's ways that could go wrong. There's ways the Valyrians could be mishandled, even if they're black, that you could then make them, just because they're black doesn't mean that they're well written. They could be written very poorly if they mishandle this. So I will have to watch it to judge, and I'm sorry, I can't say more than that, other than that I wish this interview was, that you both wasn't giving excuses, and then the showrunners themselves weren't giving excuses, they just weren't being specific. But what more can they say than we're trying to walk the line that it's not gratuitous, but still true to the text? I will have to see it to judge it. What do you think of all this? Because there are no wrong answers. What do you think of all this, specifically what this interview said? So like and subscribe, because I will be covering this as the show moves forward, and how did they try to balance everything.